It was supposed to be a chill weekend at Nora's house. Nothing unusual, just 3 girls, junk food, and a late-night movie marathon. Her parents were away for the weekend, leaving us with the whole place to ourselves. I remember feeling excited, the kind of excitement that mixes with a faint nervousness, the way empty houses sometimes make you feel. We ordered pizza, built a blanket fort in the living room, and scrolled through horror movies until we landed on one called The Mirror Game. The name sounded corny, but Nora insisted it was based on a real ritual. She said if you turned off all the lights and stared into a mirror at midnight, you could see your other self. Paige rolled her eyes, but Nora's grin was unsettling, like she'd already tried it before. By 11:58 p.m., the house had gone quiet. The wind brushed against the windows, and the only light came from a candle Nora placed near the bathroom mirror. "Come on," she whispered. "It's just for fun." We stood there, 3 reflections staring back at us, flickering in the candlelight. Nora began chanting something she said she found online. The sound of her voice echoed strangely in that small space. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then Paige said softly, "Do you guys see that?" Behind Nora's reflection, a 4th face was taking shape. Pale, long-haired, with hollow eyes that didn't blink. I thought maybe it was a trick of the light or that my eyes were playing games. But when the candle flickered, the face smiled. I screamed and turned around. Nothing there, just the shower curtain swaying slightly. Nora laughed nervously and blew out the candle. "You girls are such babies," she said, but her hands were trembling. We went back to the living room, trying to shake it off, but the house suddenly felt wrong. Colder, heavier. Every creak sounded like footsteps upstairs. Nora turned on the TV to distract us, but the screen flickered, just static. Then, for a split second, our reflections appeared again, only this time on the screen. And behind us, that same 4th figure, smiling wider. Paige started crying. "This isn't funny anymore," she said. Nora grabbed the remote, hitting buttons, but the static only grew louder, a distorted whisper filling the room. I swear I heard it say her name, Nora. We unplugged the TV, but the whisper didn't stop. It was coming from somewhere else, from the hallway mirror near the stairs. I glanced toward it and froze. Nora was standing in front of the mirror, staring into it like she was hypnotized. Her reflection wasn't moving, it just stood there smiling back at her while she stayed perfectly still. "Nora," I shouted. She didn't respond. I ran up and pulled her away. But as soon as I did, her reflection lingered a moment longer, before slowly turning its head toward me. That's when every mirror in the house cracked at once. The sound was deafening. Shards scattered across the floor, and Nora collapsed, screaming. The lights went out. We ran outside barefoot, not even stopping to grab our phones. When her parents came back the next morning, they found the mirrors shattered, every single one, even the tiny ones on makeup kits. Nora didn't speak for days. When she finally did, she only said one thing. "She's still inside." She said she likes my face. When my grandmother passed away, she left me something strange. porcelain doll with cracked cheeks and a faded red ribbon around its neck. She called it Annabelle. I was 16, and dolls weren't exactly my thing anymore. But Grandma had always been sentimental, so I placed it on my dresser beside the window. I didn't think much of it until the third night, when I woke up to the sound of porcelain scraping against wood. The doll had moved. At first, I thought maybe I'd left it in a different spot. Maybe I'd knocked it over before sleeping. But then it happened again the next night. This time, Annabelle was facing the bed, her glassy eyes fixed directly at me. I told Mom, but she just laughed. "It's just your imagination, sweetheart. You miss Grandma, that's all." Maybe she was right. But then, the whispers began. Every night around 3 a.m., I'd hear someone softly humming, the same lullaby Grandma used to sing. The sound came from near the dresser. I started sleeping with headphones on, pretending everything was normal. But one night the humming stopped midway, replaced by a faint voice that said, "Don't look." My blood ran cold. I stayed frozen in bed, heart pounding. Slowly, the mattress dipped, like someone small had just climbed onto it. My breath hitched. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. When I finally dared to turn my head, the doll was sitting beside me. I threw it across the room and ran to turn on the lights. The doll was gone. The next morning, Mom found it neatly sitting on the dresser again, the ribbon tied tighter than before. That's when I started noticing other things. The smell of Grandma's perfume lingering in my room, drawers opening by themselves, and my cat refusing to enter after sunset. One evening, I came home from school to find the words, "I protected you," written on my mirror in a shaky hand. I screamed for Mom, but she thought I was playing a prank. That night I set up my phone camera before sleeping, just to prove something was happening. Around 3:17 a.m., the camera caught movement. Annabelle's head turned toward the window. Then her arm lifted and pointed. Outside. The next morning, we discovered someone had tried to break into our backyard. The police said the lock had been tampered with. Nothing was stolen. But right below my bedroom window were muddy footprints. After that, I started feeling differently about the doll. Maybe she was protecting me, like the message said. Maybe Grandma had left her for that reason. For weeks, nothing else happened. Then, one night, I woke up to the sound of glass shattering. My mirror had cracked down the middle, and on my pillow lay a single porcelain shard, shaped almost like a teardrop. The doll was gone. Mom thought I threw it away, but I hadn't. We searched everywhere, but there was no trace, not even a chip of porcelain. A month later, a letter arrived in the mail, addressed to my grandmother's name. No return address. Inside was only one thing: Annabelle's red ribbon tied in a perfect bow. And at the bottom of the envelope, written in faded pencil, were the words, "You're safe now." She moved on. I needed a break. A few days away from the city, away from noise, screens, and people. I booked a cheap Airbnb cabin deep in the countryside. The pictures showed cozy wooden walls, a fireplace, and a small lake nearby. It looked perfect. When I arrived, everything was just as the photos promised. Clean, peaceful, and quiet, maybe too quiet. The owner, an older man named Gerald, handed me the keys and said something strange before leaving. "If you hear anyone walking upstairs at night," he said with a small laugh, "don't worry. The wood just settles when it's cold." It was early evening when I unpacked, made some coffee, and sat by the window. The sun dipped below the trees, painting the lake orange. The silence was oddly thick, like the forest was holding its breath. By midnight, the temperature had dropped. I was halfway through a horror podcast when I heard it. Slow, deliberate footsteps coming from the second floor. At first, I smiled nervously. "Would settle in," I told myself. But then, the steps came again, heavier this time. Back and forth, back and forth. I froze. The cabin only had one floor. I checked the layout online just to be sure. No stairs, no attic, nothing. My hands started shaking. I grabbed my phone flashlight and began to check each corner of the house. Nothing. No signs of anyone. I returned to the couch, trying to convince myself I was overreacting. Then, I noticed something strange. A small door behind the bookshelf, one I hadn't seen before. It was half covered by stacked boxes. My curiosity won. I moved the boxes aside, opened the door, and found a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The air smelled damp, metallic, like rusted pipes. My flashlight flickered as I went down. At the bottom was a cramped basement, cold, unfinished, and cluttered with old furniture. And on one wall hung a large, framed portrait of a woman. Her expression was blank, her eyes unsettlingly real. Something about that painting made me uneasy. I took a step closer and realized her eyes weren't painted. They were glass. Behind them, a small circular hole was drilled straight through the frame. I leaned forward to look closer and heard a faint breath from the other side. I stumbled backward, heart racing. The breathing continued, soft and rhythmic, as if someone were standing right behind the wall, watching me through the hole. I bolted up the stairs, slammed the door, and shoved the bookshelf back in place. I didn't sleep that night. At dawn, I packed my things and waited outside until Gerald returned. I tried to act calm, but he noticed my pale face immediately. "Something wrong?" he asked. I hesitated. "Does anyone else live here? Maybe below the house?" For a moment, he didn't speak. Then, in a flat voice, he said, "You opened the door, didn't you?" My stomach dropped. He sighed, looking out toward the woods. "You shouldn't have gone down there. She doesn't like being seen." I demanded an explanation, but he just said I should leave immediately. He even refunded my money in cash and told me to never book that property again. I left, shaking. But the story didn't end there. 2 weeks later, a detective called me. He said they'd raided that same Airbnb after another guest went missing. Behind the wall in the basement, they found a hidden room, small, windowless, filled with cameras and food wrappers. Someone had been living there for months, watching guests through holes drilled behind mirrors and paintings. When the police searched for Gerald, they couldn't find him. The number he'd given me was disconnected. The listing was deleted, and the house was marked under investigation. But sometimes, when I scroll through Airbnb late at night, I swear I see that same cabin pop up again. Same photos, same description, same cheap price, just under a different host name. And every time the last line of the description still reads, "Don't worry if you hear someone upstairs. It's just the house settling." When I was 21, I was scraping by at a small consulting agency. My paycheck barely covered rent, but I kept daydreaming about studying abroad one day. I needed extra income, badly. Around that time, OnlyFans started to boom, and I kept reading stories of ordinary women making good money from home. I wasn't famous or glamorous, but desperation has a funny way of pushing you to experiment. So, late one night I made an account. I recorded a small introduction video, promising friendly interaction and exclusive content. Then, I uploaded a few carefully framed photos. It felt strange, but also liberating. Within a couple of weeks, a handful of people subscribed. $10 a month per person, plus tips. Wasn't life-changing, but it was a start. Every cent went into my travel fund. I swore I'd delete the account once I had enough to buy a ticket overseas. Life at my day job continued normally. I attended meetings, typed reports, and tried to look professional. One afternoon, our firm organized a networking conference. I shook dozens of hands and handed out piles of business cards that listed both my work and personal contact information. By the end of the day, every face blurred together. That night, back home, I logged into my OnlyFans to unwind. A new subscriber appeared, username John Smith. Pretty generic. He messaged her right away. $10 a month. Netflix costs more. Totally worth it. Your gorgeous flattery online usually meant someone wanted something, but I replied politely. He asked light questions. If I had a pet, no. A boyfriend, also no. Whether I lived alone. I mentioned a roommate who happened to be away. His tone turned flirtier. You're even prettier than your photos. How about a pouty selfie? I'll tip you $5. I was exhausted from the conference, but easy money is easy money. I fixed my hair, snapped the photo, sent it, and he unlocked it instantly. Then came another request. Your feet in heels, another $5. Weird, but harmless, I thought. He kept tipping, requesting specific angles, poses, outfits. Each time, a small transaction pinged. Then his message changed. Greater than, add me on Instagram. I'll pay $10 just for an ad. Fine. I hadn't used Instagram in months anyway. I accepted his payment and searched his handle. The account had no posts, but the profile ring was glowing. He'd recently added a story. Curiosity 1. I tapped it. The first clip showed my house, filmed from the trees across the street. 2 hours ago. My stomach tightened. Another clip appeared, recorded 5 minutes earlier, closer this time, zooming toward my bedroom window, the only one lit. Then the third story loaded, shot from my front porch, through the glass door, just minutes ago. My phone vibrated with a new message, greater than, let me in. I froze. My heart hammered so loudly, I could hear it in my ears. I locked my bedroom door, dialed 911 with trembling hands, and whispered that someone was outside my house. While I waited for police, new messages popped up. Greater than Come outside or I'll have to come in. The doorknob downstairs rattled violently, then came banging. I screamed for help out the window, but our neighborhood wasn't exactly friendly. No response. Suddenly the noise stopped. For a fleeting moment I hoped he'd left, until I heard tapping on the windows below, then shattering glass. I pressed myself into a corner shaking. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Thank God. When officers finally arrived, the man was gone. They found the living room window smashed with a rock. I showed them everything. Screenshots, the Instagram handle, the OnlyFans messages. They patrolled the area but found nothing. The account vanished hours later. As I packed an overnight bag under police supervision, dread sank deeper. How had he known where I lived? My personal address wasn't anywhere online. Then I remembered those business cards from the conference. My name, company, and home address printed neatly beneath my email. He must have been one of the men I'd met there. One of the countless faces who'd smiled and said, "Nice to meet you." I gave the investigators every card I'd collected. Nothing came of it. No fingerprints, no leads. John Smith was just a mask behind a throwaway account. He'd asked if I lived alone, if I had a dog. He'd been gathering information, piece by piece. I shut down my OnlyFans account that same night and moved back in with my parents. Even now, I still work for the same consultancy. Every time I attend a meeting shaking a client's hand, part of me wonders if it's him, the man who stood outside my house, phone in hand, whispering, "Let me in." I still have that business card box. One of those names belongs to a monster I accidentally invited into my life. When I first joined OnlyFans, I told myself it was just a temporary thing. I was between jobs, living with my parents, and trying to earn some quick cash without making a scene. I wasn't ashamed, but I knew my family wouldn't approve. So I promised myself to be discreet, post when the house was empty, never tell anyone I knew, and keep my private life separate from my online one. To my surprise, it took off faster than I expected. Within months, I had thousands of followers, and my account was generating more money than I'd ever made in my life. It felt surreal. My fans were mostly polite and supportive, and many seemed genuinely interested in my daily life, not just the pictures. To keep them engaged, I started streaming short, casual videos, shopping trips, coffee runs, even lazy afternoons at home. It was a way to connect, a window into my world, or so I thought. One sunny afternoon, I went to the mall to buy some new outfits. I decided to live stream while I shopped, asking my viewers for opinions on colors and styles. They loved that kind of content. It made them feel included. For about 20 minutes, everything was normal. I laughed, chatted, and walked through the aisles like I was talking to friends. That evening, while checking my messages, I noticed one from a longtime subscriber. "Greater than you lied to us. You never told us you had a boyfriend. I'm done supporting you." The message confused me. I wasn't dating anyone. I replied, "Hey, I'm single. What makes you think otherwise?" His answer made my blood run cold. "Greater than don't play dumb. The guy who's always with you. The one in the green shirt. He was at the store with you today. I frowned. What guy? I hadn't gone with anyone. I replayed the live stream, and there, barely visible behind me, was a tall man in a green shirt, following closely through the aisles. His face wasn't clear at first, but he appeared again and again throughout the video, always lingering a few steps behind me. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe he was just another shopper. Coincidences happen, right? But my subscriber insisted he'd seen that same man before, in several of my older videos. I scrolled back through my old streams. There he was, at the park, at the cafe, even at the beach. Always somewhere in the background. Always in that same green shirt, watching. I hadn't noticed him once while filming, and now I couldn't unsee him. The realization hit hard. This man hadn't just stumbled into my videos. He'd been following me for weeks, maybe months. Panic started to crawl under my skin. Still, I didn't tell my parents. My father worked in law enforcement, but how could I admit to him that his daughter was making adult content online? I convinced myself it would stop if I went quiet for a while. So I did. I stopped posting, stopped streaming, and waited. For 2 weeks, everything seemed fine. I didn't see him anywhere. My followers grew restless about my absence, but I felt safer staying silent. Then, one weekend, my parents went out of town for a few days. I finally had the house to myself again and decided to take new photos to keep my account alive. I cooked dinner, opened the kitchen window to clear the air, and went upstairs to shoot. After uploading the pictures, I decided to do a quick live session to reconnect with my followers. The mood was light. I joked, answered comments, and apologized for disappearing. After a few minutes, I felt thirsty and went downstairs with my phone to grab water, still streaming, still chatting. Then a new comment popped up, greater than, "Who's that man at your window?" At first, I thought it was a joke, but when I looked at my phone screen, I saw it, a blurry reflection behind me, a pale face pressed against the glass. My heart stopped. I turned around slowly, and there he was, the same tall man in the same green shirt, standing outside, peering into my living room with a twisted grin. I screamed and bolted upstairs, locking myself in the bathroom. My hand shook as I called my parents. My dad told me to stay calm, that they were calling the police and driving home immediately. He told me to move to the attic if I could. When I cracked open the bathroom door, I heard movement downstairs, soft footsteps, the faint creak of the floorboards. That's when I remembered the open kitchen window. He was inside. He began calling out, voice dripping with amusement. "Mellow Cat, where are you?" Hearing my OnlyFans username come from his mouth made me sick. He'd been watching me, memorizing every detail. I ran into my parents' bedroom and slammed the door shut, just as his footsteps thundered up the stairs. He threw himself against the door, shouting obscenities. I yanked down the attic ladder, climbed up, and pulled it shut behind me seconds before he burst through. I crouched there in the darkness. Hands over my mouth, trying not to make a sound while he tore the room apart below. Glass shattered, furniture crashed, and his rage echoed through the house. Then, Silence. Minutes later, sirens wailed outside. I didn't move until I heard my dad shouting my name. The police swept the house, but the man had already vanished. The only evidence left behind was strange. No fingerprints, no footprints, but the investigators found faint chemical traces on the door handle. Later, they told us it was chloroform residue. My stomach turned. The man had broken in planning to knock me out, maybe worse. The only thing missing from the house was my laptop, which held unreleased photos. He hadn't gotten me, but he'd taken a piece of me anyway. I deleted my account that night without saying goodbye to anyone. My parents finally learned everything, and I moved in with my sister in another city. I changed my number, avoided social media, and tried to start over. But sometimes, late at night, I still wake up to the sound of creaking wood, convinced someone's standing just outside the window, wearing a green shirt, waiting for me to go live again. When I first moved into the old apartment, I didn't think much of it. The walls were cracked, the floorboards creaked, and the air smelled faintly of dust and forgotten time. It wasn't perfect, but for someone like me, a quiet art student barely surviving on part-time jobs, it was home enough. The only thing that stood out was an antique mirror in the living room. It was tall, framed in tarnished gold, and leaned slightly against the wall as if it had been watching the room for years. The landlord told me not to move it. People say it's bad luck, he said with a shrug. But if you don't bother it, it won't bother you. I laughed it off. Ghost stories were just stories, right? That first evening, after unpacking boxes, I wiped the mirror with an old cloth. A faint chill ran down my spine as I did. The glass wasn't smooth. It felt uneven, almost like something pulsed beneath its surface. When I looked at my reflection, for a fraction of a second, I thought I saw someone else standing beside me. A tall, thin shadow. Then it was gone. Days passed, and life settled into a strange calm. The apartment was quiet, sometimes too quiet. My reflection, though, began to disturb me. Every night before bed, I'd catch something slightly wrong. A blink delayed, a smile that didn't quite match mine. Sometimes I swore my reflection looked tired, older. One morning, while painting, I noticed something strange. A faint handprint appeared on the mirror, inside the glass. It looked pressed from within. I stared for a long time, my chest tightening. The fingers were long, thin, and left small streaks, as if the person behind the glass was sliding downward. When I blinked, the handprint was gone. That night I dreamed of water. Endless, dark water. A woman with the soaked hair stood behind me in the reflection. She whispered something soft, like a prayer. I woke up gasping for air, the room colder than before. The next few nights I tried ignoring it. I told myself I was just overworked. But then came the whispers. At first they were faint, like a breeze slipping under the door. Then clearer. Words formed. I remember you. I froze. The voice came from the mirror. I stood there for minutes, staring into my reflection. Everything looked normal, but my own eyes didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like someone else was behind them, watching me. The next day, I covered the mirror with a white sheet. For 3 nights, peace returned. The apartment felt lighter. I even slept through the night. But on the 4th night, something moved under the cloth. I heard the soft dragging of fingers across the glass. Then a whisper, closer this time. You shouldn't have left me. My breath caught. I pulled the sheet away. The mirror was fogged from the inside, as though something had exhaled within it. Then I saw her, a woman's face, pale as bone, eyes hollow and black. Her mouth trembled as if she was trying to speak. When I turned my head, she didn't move. She just stared straight at me. I ran out of the apartment and stayed at a friend's place that night. I didn't tell her what really happened, just that the place creeped me out. She laughed and said, "You've been watching too many horror movies." But I couldn't laugh. That whisper still echoed in my mind. The next morning, I went back to pack my things. The apartment was silent, but the air felt thick, almost alive. The mirror was uncovered again. I hadn't touched it. The surface shimmered like water. I should have left, but curiosity won. I stepped closer. My reflection didn't follow. It stood still, staring back with a hollow smile. Then the glass rippled. A pale hand reached out. Before I could move, it grabbed my wrist, cold, firm, real. I screamed and yanked back. The mirror cracked, but the hand didn't let go until I pulled with everything I had. When it finally released, I fell to the floor. The mirror was shattered, yet my reflection in each broken piece was still moving. Each shard showed me something different. In one, I was crying. In another, screaming. In another, smiling eerily. And in one piece, I wasn't there at all. I ran. I didn't stop until I reached the street outside. My wrist burned with frostbite where that hand had grabbed me. I left everything behind. A week later, the landlord called. "You left your mirror," he said. "I don't want it," I whispered. There was silence. Then he said something that made my blood turn cold. That mirror belonged to a woman who used to live there. She vanished 30 years ago. People say she still looks for someone. It's been months since then. I live miles away, in a brighter city with no antique furniture, no mirrors in my apartment at all. But sometimes, when I pass by a shop window, or the reflection in a puddle, I see her face behind mine. Wet hair, dark eyes, whispering softly through the glass. I remember you. I was 16 years old when something happened that still makes my skin crawl whenever I think about it. My parents had gone out of town for the weekend, leaving me alone in our small 2-story house near the edge of town. It wasn't the first time I'd been home alone, and honestly, I used to enjoy the quiet. I would stay up late, play games, and eat whatever I wanted. But that particular Friday night, everything felt different, eerily quiet, almost too still. It was around 11:45 p.m. when I first heard the sound. It wasn't loud, just a soft, dragging noise coming from the gravel driveway. I thought maybe it was the wind, or a raccoon knocking over the garbage bin. I tried to ignore it, but something about the rhythm of the sound didn't match the usual nighttime noises. I muted my TV and listened carefully. The dragging sound stopped, followed by what I could only describe as a whisper, low, uneven, and almost like someone was talking to themselves. I froze. My heart started pounding, and I felt that instinctive chill of being watched. I slowly peeked through the curtains of the living room window, and that's when I saw him. A man, half naked, wearing only a torn pair of pants, was kneeling in the middle of our driveway. His hands were clasped together like he was praying, but his head was jerking unnaturally, tilting up and down as he muttered something under his breath. For a second, I couldn't move. I thought maybe he was hurt or drunk or mentally unstable. But then I saw another figure standing just behind him. A tall man in a black coat, wearing what looked like a priest's collar. The priest had his hands raised toward the sky and was whispering words I couldn't make out. I could only hear fragments, something that sounded like Latin or chanting. My first instinct was to grab my phone and call 911. But the moment I stepped back, the man in the driveway suddenly turned his head toward my window. His face, God, I still remember it. His eyes were wide open, white, like rolled back into his head, and his mouth was twisted into a smile that didn't belong to a human being. He stood up in one jerky motion and pointed directly at my window. The priest stopped chanting and began walking slowly toward the house. My heart was slamming against my ribs. I ducked down and crawled across the floor, trying to stay out of sight. I reached the hallway and grabbed the phone, but my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I dialed 911 and whispered that there were two men outside my house, one naked and one dressed like a priest. The operator told me to lock the doors and stay quiet. I ran to the back door, locked it, then checked the front door. The moment I reached it, I heard a heavy knock. 3 slow, deliberate hits. "Let us in," a voice said softly. "We only wish to pray with you." I didn't respond. I just backed away, trying not to make a sound. Then, through the thin curtain, I saw a shadow move past the window. Then another. They were circling the house. I could hear them mumbling, chanting, whispering things I couldn't understand. My stomach turned when I realized they were praying. For me. After what felt like hours, I heard sirens in the distance. The voices stopped. I peeked through the window again and saw nothing but the empty driveway. When the police arrived, they searched around but found no one. Just strange footprints, bare human prints, and next to them, deeper ones that looked like boots. The officer said it was probably a prank, or someone high on something. But here's the part that still haunts me. The next morning, I found small clumps of ash on my porch, like someone had burned a paper there. When I looked closer, I realized that the ash was sitting in the shape of 2 hands pressed together, like someone had been praying. Even now, years later, every time I hear whispering in the dark or see movement outside my window, I feel that same chill. Because deep down, I know those men weren't just strangers. They came for something, and I don't think they ever really left. It had been 2 years since that awful night with the praying men. I was still living in the same house, though my parents had added motion lights and security cameras after what happened. For a while, life felt almost normal again. I was older, busier with school, and my sister had just left for college across the state. The first week after she left, the house felt emptier than ever, but I told myself I could handle it. I'd already faced worse. One Friday evening, I was home alone again. Rain poured nonstop, tapping against the windows in a steady rhythm that was oddly comforting. I made some noodles, put on a movie, and tried to relax. Around midnight, the power flickered once, then went out completely. Only the hum of the wind filled the dark rooms. I groaned, grabbed my flashlight, and went to the fuse box in the hallway. Nothing seemed wrong. Everything was in place. I figured it was a local outage and headed back toward my room. That's when I heard it, a knock at the front door. 3 short, hesitant taps. For a moment, I thought it might be the neighbors checking if we'd lost power too. But then, I remembered that my nearest neighbor lived a good half-mile away. The knocking came again, slower this time, but harder. I hesitated, walking toward the door with the flashlight beam trembling slightly in my hand. "Who is it?" I called out. No answer, only rain. I peeked through the peephole and froze. Standing on the porch was my sister. Her hair was drenched, plastered across her face, and she looked exhausted. Relief rushed through me, followed immediately by confusion. "Emily," I whispered, opening the door a few inches. "What are you doing here? You didn't say you were coming home." She didn't respond right away. She just looked at me, blinking slowly, as if trying to remember who I was. Her lips trembled when she finally spoke. "Can I come in? It's so cold." Something in her voice made me uneasy. It was flat, emotionless. Still, it was my sister. I stepped aside and she walked in silently, dripping water on the floor. I closed the door, locking it behind her, and turned to say something, but she was already halfway down the hall, moving like she knew exactly where everything was. I followed her to the living room. She sat on the couch, staring at the dark television screen. The flashlight beam caught her reflection. It was wrong somehow. Her skin looked too pale, and her eyes, they didn't seem to focus. "Emily, are you okay? Did something happen at school?" I asked. She turned her head toward me slowly and smiled. "You don't look the same," she said softly. "What do you mean?" Her smile widened. "You were taller." A shiver ran down my spine. The last time I'd seen Emily, we'd hugged goodbye at the bus station. She'd laughed and promised to visit at Thanksgiving. Now she was here, acting like a stranger. "I'm going to call Mom," I said, pulling out my phone. Her head snapped toward me. "No." The word came out sharp, almost like a growl. "Don't call anyone. I just want to stay here. With you." Every instinct told me something was wrong. I stepped back slowly and pretended to check the phone signal. Then I whispered, "I'll be right back," and slipped toward the kitchen. I dialed Mom's number. It rang twice before she answered. "Hey, honey. Everything okay?" "Mom," I whispered, "is Emily home? Did she leave campus?" There was a pause on the line. "What? Of course she's at school. Why?" My stomach dropped. "Because she's here," I said quietly. "She's sitting in the living room." For a moment, there was only silence. Then Mom said, "Lock yourself in your room, right now. I'm calling the police." My hands went numb. I looked toward the living room, but the couch was empty. A wet footprint marked the carpet, leading down the hallway toward my bedroom. I ran to the nearest door, the bathroom, and locked myself inside. I could hear soft footsteps outside, slow and deliberate. Then her voice. "Why are you hiding from me?" She knocked gently on the bathroom door. "You let me in. Remember?" I held my breath, gripping the sink so tightly my knuckles turned white. I heard her whisper again, but this time her voice changed, lower, deeper, like two people speaking at once. "You should have stayed with us that night." The power suddenly came back on. Light flooded under the bathroom door. I listened for movement, but the house was silent. After a full minute, I forced myself to open the door. The hallway was empty. The footprints ended halfway down the carpet. The front door stood wide open, rain blowing in from outside. The police arrived 20 minutes later. They searched every room, every corner of the property. Nothing. Mom and Dad came home the next morning. We checked the security footage from the night before, expecting to see Emily arrive on the porch. But the cameras showed no one. The front door had simply opened on its own. That night I got a call from my sister at college. She sounded tired but cheerful. "Hey, just checking in. You good at home?" I didn't tell her what happened. I just said yes. But sometimes, when it rains late at night, I still hear those 3 faint knocks on the door. And every time, I wonder if I made a terrible mistake letting her in. When I was 18, my parents decided to move closer to the city, but I chose to stay behind with my dad for a while. He owned a big piece of land up north, mostly forest and open fields, and he didn't want to sell it just yet. Winters there were brutal, with snow piling up so high that sometimes the road to town disappeared completely. I didn't mind the isolation. There was something peaceful about it until that winter. It was early January, the coldest night of the year. The air was so sharp it felt like glass against your skin. My dad had gone into town for supplies, leaving me alone for the night. I was sitting near the wood stove, scrolling through my phone, when I heard a faint scraping noise at the window. At first, I thought it was a tree branch swaying in the wind. But when I looked outside, I realized there were no trees close enough to reach the house. I brushed it off, put my earbuds in, and went back to reading. Then I heard it again, this time louder, like nails dragging across the glass. I turned off the music and stared at the window. Nothing, only darkness and the faint reflection of my own face. I told myself to relax. The wind does weird things out here. But then came a knock. 3 slow, heavy knocks on the front door. My first thought was that Dad might have come back early. I grabbed a flashlight and walked to the door, calling out, "Dad, you forget your keys again?" No answer. I turned the lock and opened it just a crack. The freezing air hit me instantly, carrying tiny flakes of snow inside. The porch light flickered weakly, and that's when I saw the footprints. Bare footprints in the snow, leading up to the porch and stopping right in front of me. But there was no one there. The flashlight beam swept across the yard, landing on the tree line about 30 feet away. And that's where I saw him, A man standing motionless, facing the house. He was tall, wearing a dark coat, but no hat, no gloves. His head tilted slightly as if he was studying me. I called out again, "Hey, you okay?" No movement, no sound. He just stood there, staring. The snow swirled between us, thick and white, but he didn't flinch. I shut the door, locked it, and backed away slowly. My hands were trembling. I went around the house, checking every window. The motion lights outside kept flickering, but I couldn't see him anymore. I tried to convince myself it was just some traveler who got lost, maybe drunk or hypothermic. Still, I grabbed my dad's shotgun from the wall, just in case. I loaded it and sat by the window, waiting for my dad to come back. About 20 minutes later, I saw movement again, closer this time. The man was standing by the barn, half hidden in the shadows. He was still staring at the house. I wanted to yell, but something in my gut told me not to. It felt like he wanted me to make noise, to open the door again. Then, slowly, he started walking toward the house. Each step crunched in the snow, deliberate and heavy. I raised the shotgun, heart pounding. He reached the porch, and for a second, he disappeared under the overhang. I couldn't see him anymore. The next sound I heard was a soft tapping on the window behind me. I spun around. There he was, his face pressed against the glass. Pale, lips blue from the cold, eyes wide open. He grinned when he saw the gun, like he found it funny. Then he whispered something I couldn't hear through the window. I didn't think. I just fired. The blast shattered the window, spraying glass and snow everywhere. I dropped to the floor, shaking. When I looked back up, the man was gone. I ran outside, ignoring the cold biting into my skin. There were footprints leading away from the house, bare feet bleeding into the snow. But they stopped halfway across the yard. Just stopped, as if he'd vanished into thin air. Dad came home about an hour later and found me sitting by the door, still holding the shotgun. He checked outside but found nothing except the footprints and broken glass. He told me it was probably some vagrant, maybe high or delusional, who wandered off and froze somewhere in the woods. But 2 days later, when the sheriff came by, he told us something strange. A man's body had been found several miles north. No shoes, wearing a torn black coat. The odd part was, according to the coroner, he'd been dead for over a week. I didn't say anything, but I knew what I saw that night. The way he moved, the way he smiled. He wasn't looking for help. He was looking for a way in. Even now, every winter when snow hits the windows just right, I swear I hear that slow, scraping sound again. Like he's still out there, waiting. I was 17 when this happened, and to this day, the memory still makes me uneasy. Back then, I was one of those teenagers who liked to mess around on Omegle whenever boredom struck. I'd seen hundreds of so-called Omegle horror stories on YouTube, but I always thought they were exaggerated. I didn't think anything bad could actually happen through a random chat site. That was my mistake. It was a rainy Thursday evening. My homework was due the next morning, but I decided to take a small break and go on Omegle for a few minutes. The idea was simple. Act goofy. Talk to random strangers. and maybe scare a few people for fun. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just some late-night entertainment. After a few harmless chats, I was paired with a man whose webcam was already on. He was older, maybe in his 30s, with a pale face and eyes that seemed too wide open. His expression didn't change when I typed, "Hey." He just kept staring at me through the screen. I laughed and said, "Dude, blink or something." He didn't. Instead, he typed, "Talk." I ignored him and kept quiet, figuring I'd annoy him by not responding. Then he typed again, "If you don't talk, I'll find you." That line made me laugh nervously. I typed back, "Sure you will." He tilted his head slightly, his lips twitching into what looked like a smile. Then he said out loud, in a deep, flat tone that my speakers distorted slightly, "You should talk more." I felt a weird chill and quickly disconnected. For a second, I thought about how strange that was, but I brushed it off as some creep trying to scare people online. I shut down the tab and went back to my homework, like nothing had happened. Maybe 15 minutes passed before my dogs started barking outside. It wasn't unusual, but this time they wouldn't stop. I shouted their names through the window, but they just kept going crazy. I figured maybe a raccoon or stray cat had wandered into the yard. I calmed them down, locked the back door, and sat back down at my desk. Then came a knock. Not the front door, the back one. That made my heart drop. The back door was behind a locked gate, and the only way someone could reach it was by climbing a 4-foot fence or having a key. I froze for a few seconds, trying to convince myself that it must have been the wind. But the knock came again, 3 short taps this time. I grabbed a flashlight and peered through the curtain, but there was nobody. My heart was thumping so hard that my hands shook. I stayed by the window for 10 full minutes, scanning the dark yard, until I convinced myself it was nothing. I called my dad just to be safe and told him what happened. He sounded half asleep and said he'd check around the house when he got home from work. That made me feel a bit better. About 30 minutes later, the barking started again, louder this time, desperate. I yelled at the dogs, but they didn't stop. That's when I heard a thump against the door. It wasn't a knock this time. It sounded like someone had thrown something heavy. I turned on the porch light and stepped closer. Lying on the ground was a small rock with a piece of paper wrapped around it. I opened the door slowly and picked it up, my pulse racing. My dogs were pacing along the fence, growling toward the driveway. I unwrapped the note and saw the words written in thick, uneven black marker. "I know where you live." I felt my stomach twist. I dropped the note and locked every single door and window in the house. Then I called my dad again, my voice shaking. He said he was already on his way home and told me to stay inside with the dogs. I remember sitting there in the corner of my room, the flashlight in one hand and my phone in the other, waiting for the sound of his car to pull into the driveway. When he finally got home, he searched the yard with a flashlight, but didn't find anything. No footprints, no strangers, no one nearby. He said it was probably some local kids trying to prank me. I nodded, but deep down I knew it wasn't that. The message felt personal. It felt like whoever had sent it knew me. That night I couldn't sleep. Every little sound made me jump. I kept seeing the face of that man from Omegle, his wide, staring eyes, and that slow, eerie smile. My brain tried to tell me it was just a coincidence, but my gut said otherwise. The next few days went by without incident, but I couldn't bring myself to go back on Omegle. I stopped answering random messages online, deleted my account, and even changed my Wi-Fi name and passwords. I didn't tell my friends because I knew they'd just make jokes about it, but the part that still makes my blood run cold happened 2 weeks later. I was leaving for school early in the morning when I noticed something on the front gate. A small folded paper wedged between the bars. I opened it. It said only one word: Park. That was the last time I ever went on Omegle. I was 15 when my parents decided to spend the weekend visiting my uncle, who lived 2 hours away. At first, they insisted I should go with them, but I begged them to let me stay home. My best friend Alex lived nearby, and we had already planned a gaming night we didn't want to cancel. After a long debate, they finally agreed on one strict condition: no parties, no guests, except Alex, and I had to answer every call they made. When they left that afternoon, the house felt strangely quiet. For a while, I wandered from room to room, feeling both free and a little nervous. Alex showed up right before sunset, carrying a backpack full of snacks, a few horror movies, and his gaming controller. By evening, the living room was a mess of empty soda cans, pizza boxes, and laughter echoing through the house. Everything felt light and harmless. Around midnight, after hours of gaming, Alex suggested we try something different. Omegle. He'd been on the site before, talking to random strangers for fun. I wasn't too sure. The idea of faceless people appearing on screen in the dark felt unsettling. But Alex convinced me, saying we might meet someone interesting or just prank a few weirdos. At first, the screen showed random strangers, old men, teenagers, and people skipping in seconds. It was boring until 2 girls appeared on the chat. They looked around our age, maybe 16 or 17, sitting in a dimly lit bedroom. Both were smiling, but their eyes didn't seem to match their expressions. They said they were from our city and were also bored at home. We started chatting, and soon they asked if we wanted to hang out in person. Alex got excited immediately. He asked where they lived, but they avoided giving details. Instead, one of them typed, "We can come to the park near the playground." We know it. It was the park only 10 minutes from my house. Alex was already grabbing his jacket before I could even respond. Something about it felt wrong. I told him it was stupid to meet strangers at midnight, especially people we just met online. But Alex brushed it off, saying it was just for fun, and that we wouldn't even get close if anything felt sketchy. After a few minutes of arguing, I gave in. I didn't want him to go alone. We messaged the girls back, saying we'd meet them at the playground. They sent a smiley face and wrote, "We'll be waiting." The night outside was colder than I expected. The streets were empty, the only sound being the rustle of leaves in the wind. The park lights flickered weakly, and the swing set creaked every few seconds, as if someone had been there moments before. But when we arrived, the place was empty. No girls, no laughter, nothing. We called out once, then twice. Silence. Alex took out his phone to message them, but before he could type, I noticed something. There was a man standing near the trees. He wasn't moving, just watching. His figure was tall, shoulders stiff, his face half hidden in the shadows. At first, I thought it might be a late-night jogger, or maybe a drunk. But when I whispered to Alex, the man tilted his head slightly, like he'd heard us. My stomach tightened. Alex, still thinking it was a prank, shouted, "Hey, you seen two girls around here?" The man didn't answer. He just stepped forward, slowly. We both started backing up. My heart was racing so fast I could hear it pounding in my ears. The man's face became visible under the flickering streetlight. It was expressionless, eyes wide and fixed directly on me. There was something unnatural about the way he moved, like every step took effort, but no sound. Then, out of nowhere, Alex's phone buzzed. A new Snapchat notification. Anexoxo 99. "We see you." He froze. "What the hell?" he whispered. That was the moment the man lunged. We ran. Hard. The path out of the park seemed miles away. I could hear heavy footsteps behind us, faster, closer. I turned once and saw his arm reach out. His hand brushed my sleeve and I screamed. He caught my wrist, fingers like iron. I struggled, shouting for Alex, but he was already ahead, sprinting toward the gate. The man's grip tightened, his face twisted, as if angry that I'd called for help. Then, sirens. Blue and red lights flashed from the street. A police car slowed near the park entrance. The man released me instantly and vanished into the darkness between the trees. The officers found me trembling on the ground, trying to breathe. They took me home and called my parents, who drove back that same night. When they arrived, I couldn't even speak properly. I just kept saying, he was there. He was real. The police searched the park for hours but found no trace. No footprints, no jacket, nothing. The only strange thing they noticed was a phone lying near the swings. Its screen shattered, battery dead. No SIM card inside. Later, Alex showed me his phone. The Snapchat account, Anexoxo 99, was gone. Deleted. Vanished as if it had never existed. Even now, years later, I still see that shadow when I close my eyes. Every time I pass that park, the swing creaks in the wind. And for a split second, I swear, someone's still watching. When I was a child, my mother used to tell me never to look into a mirror in a dark room. She said mirrors can hold reflections that don't belong to this world. And if you stare too long, something might stare back. I always thought it was just one of those superstitions parents make up to keep kids from scaring themselves at night. I wish I still believed that. It happened during my college years. I had moved into a small rented house near the outskirts of the city. Cheap rent, quiet neighborhood, and enough space for a student like me. The place was old, but not haunted looking. At least, not at first glance. The previous owner had left behind some furniture, including a large antique mirror in the hallway. It was the kind of mirror that looked expensive once, but now had cracks running across its frame. I thought it gave the place a bit of character. The first few nights were peaceful. I studied late, watched horror movies, and enjoyed the freedom of living alone. But around the fifth night, I noticed something odd. Every time I passed the hallway mirror after midnight, I'd catch a faint shadow behind my reflection, like someone was standing a few feet behind me. I turned around several times, but there was never anyone there. I assumed it was just my tired eyes or the dim lighting. I even joked to myself, guess I'm starring in my own ghost story. Then one evening, while I was brushing my teeth, I heard a soft creaking sound from the hallway. I peeked out and saw the mirror swaying slightly, even though no wind could reach that spot. I shrugged it off, finished brushing, and went to bed. But just as I was about to fall asleep, I heard a whisper, so faint it could have been the wind. Still, it came from the hallway. It sounded like someone saying my name. I froze, every nerve in my body alert. "Hello," I called out. No answer. The whisper stopped. I eventually convinced myself it was just my imagination and forced myself to sleep. The next morning, I noticed fingerprints on the mirror, long, thin ones, almost like someone had pressed their hand against the glass from the inside. I wiped it down, laughing nervously. Creepy, but maybe I did that without realizing. That night, I stayed up late working on an assignment. Around 2 a.m., my laptop battery died, and I got up to plug it in. As I walked through the hallway, I caught a glimpse of movement in the mirror again. Only this time, the reflection didn't match mine. When I lifted my arm, the reflection stayed still. When I stepped closer, it smiled. I stumbled backward, my pulse racing, trying to tell myself it was a trick of the light. But then the reflection began to tilt its head, not like a normal movement, but slowly, jerkily, as if the neck bones were cracking with each shift. And that grin, it stretched wider than any human mouth could. I ran into my room, slammed the door shut, and stayed there until morning. I didn't sleep a second. The first rays of sunlight made the house feel safe again, but something inside me knew the comfort wouldn't last. I covered the mirror with a sheet and decided to move out within the week. The following evening, while packing, I heard the mirror knock. It wasn't loud, but it was deliberate. 3 sharp taps from behind the fabric. I froze where I stood, staring at the covered shape. My instincts screamed to leave, but curiosity, stupid, reckless curiosity, made me lift a corner of the sheet. What I saw still haunts me. The reflection was no longer mine. It was me, but not me. Pale, hollow-eyed, with a dark smear running down its neck like dried blood. It mimicked my movements again for a second, then stopped, and reached toward the inside of the glass. The surface rippled like water disturbed by wind. I dropped the sheet and ran. I slept in my car that night and never stepped foot in that house again. When the landlord called to ask why I'd left suddenly, I told him about the mirror. He sighed almost knowingly and said, "You're not the first tenant to complain about that mirror. It belonged to the original owner's wife. She died standing right in front of it." He paused before adding quietly, "We've tried moving it. Every time it ends up back in that hallway the next morning." That was 3 years ago. Last month, while scrolling through a local marketplace app, I saw a listing for an antique hallway mirror. The photos showed the same cracked frame. And though I know it sounds impossible, I could swear that in the reflection, just barely, someone was standing there. When I was 23, my boyfriend and I broke up, and I decided to leave my hometown behind for good. Everything there reminded me of us. The streets we used to walk, the coffee shop on the corner, even the sound of the trains passing at night. I couldn't stand it anymore. I wanted a clean start somewhere far away, somewhere nobody knew my name or my past. So one evening, I packed everything I could fit into my old blue car. A few boxes, my clothes, and a folded map, and drove south toward Houston. The road stretched endlessly beneath the moonlight, long and empty. The air was humid, the radio barely catching a station, and I remember feeling both terrified and free at the same time. It was around 3 a.m. when I stopped in a small Texas town to refuel. The highway had been completely deserted for miles, so the glow of that lone gas station felt almost welcoming at first. The air smelled faintly of gasoline and dust. A flickering light above the pump buzzed in the silence. I got out of the car and started refueling. The world was quiet, heavy, like the town itself was asleep. I stood beside my car, scrolling aimlessly through my phone, trying to find music. That's when a pickup truck rolled up to the opposite pump. At first, I didn't pay attention. I heard the engine shut off, the sound of boots hitting the pavement. When I looked up, one of the men was staring at me, not glancing, not curious, just watching, with a blank, steady look that made my stomach twist. I smiled nervously, the polite kind of smile women give when they feel unsafe but don't want to show it, and turned back to my car. As I went to replace the nozzle, I realized 2 more men were walking up, one from each side. My chest tightened instantly. Something in the air changed, a quiet danger I could feel in my bones. I reached for my door, my fingers trembling, whispering to myself, "Just leave, just leave." Before I could open it, they rushed me. I screamed, but the sound came out broken and desperate. One grabbed my wrists, another covered my mouth, and I fought with everything I had, kicking, twisting, clawing. They were stronger. 2 of them dragged me toward their truck while another shoved me from behind. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst. They forced me into the back seat, pressing me down so hard I could barely breathe. My tears blurred everything. The car's roof, their faces, the smell of sweat and alcohol. I remember scratching one of them across the face as hard as I could, digging my nails into his skin. I wasn't thinking clearly, only hoping that if I didn't survive, his DNA would be there. They drove fast, the tires crunching over gravel. After what felt like forever, they pulled up to a cheap roadside motel, the kind with faded neon signs and half-broken doors. They carried me inside a dim, filthy room. I begged and begged. I said I wouldn't tell anyone, that I just wanted to go home. The oldest one, the one who smelled like beer and tobacco, hit me across the cheek and told me to shut up. The others laughed. They tied my wrists and ankles with a belt and something thin, maybe a shoelace. The air in the room was thick with rot and beer. Trash littered the floor, empty cans, greasy wrappers, a torn mattress with cigarette burns. It looked like they'd been staying there for days. I won't describe what happened next. Some memories are too painful to repeat. All I remember is the sound of the TV playing static, the laughter, and the cold air from a broken vent hitting my skin. Time didn't move. Hours later, one of them said they were out of beer. They argued about who should stay behind. Finally, they decided the youngest one, a boy barely older than me, would watch me while the others left. When the door shut, the silence was unbearable. My body hurt, but my mind screamed at me to move, to do something. I asked, barely whispering, if I could use the bathroom. He hesitated, chewing his lip, glancing toward the door. Finally, he untied my hands, muttering, "Don't do anything stupid." The second my hands were free, I ran. I didn't think, I just ran. I flung the door open so hard it hit the wall. He shouted after me and grabbed my arm, but I twisted and screamed, "Let me go." He froze, just for a second, eyes wide, maybe realizing what he was doing, and I tore myself free. I sprinted down the empty road barefoot, my feet bleeding from the gravel. The night air stung my face, my lungs burned, but I didn't stop. I waved frantically at the first headlights I saw. A small white sedan screeched to a stop. Inside was an older man, gruff and confused. "What the hell are you doing out here?" he barked. But when he saw my tears and bruises, his face changed instantly. I told him, breathless, that I'd been kidnapped. He didn't ask more questions. He told me to get in, locked the doors, and drove straight to the nearest police station. At the station, everything felt like a blur. Officer. At the station, everything felt like a blur. Officers wrapped me in a blanket, gave me hospital scrubs, and took my statement. They told me I'd need a medical exam at the hospital, but all I could think about was calling my mom. I just wanted her voice. I wanted to feel like I was still alive. Later, the police found them. All 5 were brothers. They said they'd been drunk, that they didn't mean to, as if that could erase anything. They were arrested, but justice doesn't fix the cracks left inside you. I moved far away after that, to the other side of the country. I changed my phone number, deleted old accounts, even changed how I looked. I still wake up some nights shaking, hearing that buzzing light above the gas pump in my dreams. My current boyfriend tells me I'm paranoid when I refuse to stop at gas stations alone, when I check the locks 3 times before bed. Maybe he's right. Maybe I am paranoid. But I can't let myself forget. Because forgetting means I could end up trusting the wrong smile again, standing under the same pale lights, thinking I'm safe, right before the nightmare begins all over. And I swore to myself that night, barefoot and bleeding on that empty Texas road, that I would never let anyone make me feel that powerless ever again.
I was 25 when I got the call that changed everything. My older sister, Mia, hadn't shown up for work in 2 days. She was never the kind to vanish without saying a word. Mia lived alone in a small wooden cabin near Hollow Creek, a stretch of dense forest about an hour outside Denver, where fog hung low and silence was thicker than the air itself. She always said she found peace there, and the loneliness that scared everyone else. I told myself she probably just needed space. But somewhere deep down, something cold and heavy told me this wasn't just another of her quiet retreats. By the time I reached the narrow gravel road that led to her place, the sun had already sunk behind the trees. My car's headlights cut through the mist, lighting up only what was directly ahead. Tall, swaying pines that seemed to close in with every turn. I felt like I was being watched, even before I arrived. The woods had that kind of silence that presses against your chest, the kind that hides every sound until something moves. Her car was there, parked at an odd angle, one wheel half in the mud. The front door of the cabin stood slightly open, rocking back and forth with each gust of wind. I called her name once, then again, louder. Nothing. Just the soft creak of wood and the whisper of pine needles scraping the roof. Inside, it smelled wrong. Stale air mixed with the sour scent of damp clothes, and something metallic underneath, faint but sharp. The lights didn't work. I used my phone's flashlight, sweeping across the kitchen. Dishes were piled up, some still wet. Her phone sat on the counter, plugged in and fully charged. Her jacket hung on the wall hook where it always did. Everything looked normal, except for one thing. A man's jacket, brown, worn, and too big to be hers, draped across the back of a chair. I froze. Mia didn't have a boyfriend. She hadn't for years. I tried to rationalize. Maybe a hiker, maybe someone she helped. But the thought didn't stick. Something inside me screamed that I wasn't alone. I called her again. That's when I heard it. A muffled thump, like something shifting behind a closed door. I moved down the hallway, every step echoing louder than it should. My palms were slick with sweat. The sound came again from her bedroom. I reached for the knob and pushed the door open slowly. Mia was there, sitting on the floor, her wrists tied together, duct tape across her mouth. Her eyes were wide, glassy, filled with terror. She tried to speak, shaking her head desperately. Before I could move, a shadow detached itself from the corner behind me. A man's hand clamped over my mouth and yanked me backward. His grip was strong, reeking of alcohol and dirt. "You shouldn't be here," he hissed, voice slurred but sharp. I tried to fight, kicked backward, hit something, but he shoved me hard into the wall. Pain burst through my skull as everything spun. I hit the floor, gasping for breath, my vision flickering between dark and light. He was tall, mid-30s maybe, beard thick and uneven, a long scar cutting down from his ear to his jaw. His eyes were bloodshot, wild, as if he hadn't slept in days. He waved a knife in front of me and told me to stay quiet. When I didn't, he twisted my arm until I screamed. The sound made him laugh. He tied my hands and shoved me beside Mia. "Found her in the woods," he said, pacing. "She didn't want to talk to me. Now she does." His words tumbled between drunken rage and childish innocence, like he didn't understand what he'd done. Hours passed. He drank. Sometimes he talked to us, sometimes to people who weren't there. At one point, he sat in front of us and told a story about how the trees whisper if you listen long enough. Mia's tears didn't stop. I tried to stay calm, scanning the room, the ropes, the knife, the broken floorboard near my foot. When he staggered outside to get another bottle from his truck, I whispered, "We're getting out." Mia's eyes locked on mine, pure fear and a small spark of hope. I rubbed the rope against the jagged nail on the floorboard, sawing back and forth until the skin on my wrists tore. The rope began to loosen. Every second felt like a heartbeat too loud. The wind outside grew stronger. The door rattled. When the rope finally slipped off, I didn't think. I moved. I ripped the tape from Mia's mouth, blood smearing her lips. "Run," I breathed. We bolted through the back door into the freezing night. The forest swallowed us whole. Branches slapped our faces, roots snagged our shoes, but we didn't stop. Behind us came his shout, a sound so sharp it sliced through the wind. "You can't hide from me." The beam of his flashlight danced through the trees. The beam of his flashlight danced through the trees. We stumbled down a slope toward the creek, our lungs burning, our breath visible in white clouds. The sound of rushing water grew louder, a way to cover our footsteps. We stepped into the current. The shock of cold nearly knocked me over, but I held Mia's hand tight. We crossed, shivering, soaked, but alive. We crouched behind a fallen log, listening. The woods were alive now. The wind, the water, the echo of his voice fading somewhere upstream. I wanted to believe he'd given up, but I knew better. Then, through the trees, headlights appeared. Slow, steady, approaching from the forest road. I ran toward them, waving, screaming until my throat burned. A ranger jumped out, flashlight sweeping over us. He wrapped us in blankets, his radio crackling with static as he called for backup. When I looked back toward the dark line of trees, I thought I saw movement, a flicker of shadow watching from the edge of the forest. But when the ranger shone his light there, it was gone. They found him 2 hours later, half conscious near the creek, knife still clutched in his hand. He'd escaped from a mental hospital 3 weeks earlier. He had been living off cabins, breaking in, stealing food, and stalking women who walked alone in the woods. Mia never returned to her cabin. Neither did I. We sold it, bought a small apartment in the city where the noise of cars and lights make it easier to sleep. But sometimes, when the night is still and the wind slides against the glass, I swear I can hear it again. That whisper, drifting through the dark like a memory that refuses to die. You shouldn't have.
When I moved into the old brick apartment building downtown, I thought I'd finally found peace. After years of running from one rented room to another, I needed a place that felt still, quiet, safe, and a little forgotten by the world. The rent was cheap, the neighborhood was calm, and the walls looked solid enough to drown out every trace of the city noise. Or so I thought. The first night, I noticed something strange. The apartment next to mine, 9B, had its lights on, a dim yellow glow seeping through the cracks beneath the door. Yet the door was always locked. I sometimes heard faint movements from inside, dragging sounds, muffled voices, and once or twice, a small laugh that didn't sound entirely human. When I asked the landlord, he told me the unit had been vacant for years. No one's lived there since the incident, he said quickly, then pretended not to remember what incident he meant. But someone was there. I could feel it, like a heartbeat through the walls. For the first few nights, I told myself it was the plumbing, or rats, or my imagination getting used to the new place. I kept my head down, went to work, came home, cooked dinner, and scrolled through my phone until sleep blurred everything. But every night, just past midnight, the noises began again. Soft footsteps pacing slowly across the floor. Whispers through the wall that rose and fell like breathing. Sometimes it was my name, faint and broken. Anna. By the third night, I couldn't take it anymore. I stood outside 9B with my heart pounding in my throat and knocked. The light behind the curtain flickered. "Hello," I called, my voice unsteady. No answer. I turned to leave, but the doorknob rattled. Then, slowly, the door opened an inch. A foul stench escaped. Damp wood, rot, and something metallic, like old blood. I froze. The air was cold enough to sting. My hand shook as I reached forward, but before I could touch the door, it closed again with a soft, deliberate click. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that sliver of darkness behind the door. By morning, my head ached and my hands trembled. I told myself to ignore it, but I couldn't stop listening. Each sound through the wall felt closer now, like it had learned I was paying attention. The fourth night, I woke to the sound of crying. A woman's voice, low and desperate, echoing through the wall. I pressed my ear against the cold plaster. The sobbing grew louder, then shifted into ragged gasps. Suddenly, silence. Then, a dull thud, like a body hitting the floor. My chest tightened. I texted the landlord again, begging him to check 9B. He never replied. I thought of calling the police, but what would I say? There's a ghost next door. The next morning, I saw the maintenance man sweeping the hallway. His hands froze when I asked about 9B. "Don't go near that door," he muttered. "We sealed that apartment years ago. After what happened." "What happened?" I asked. He didn't answer. He just looked at the floor and walked away. That night, I double-locked my door and left every light on. But around midnight, I heard it again. The soft creak of footsteps outside my apartment. My front door handle turned, slow and steady. My heart stopped. Then came the sound of the lock clicking open. I couldn't move. I just clutched the lamp from my bedside table and waited, every muscle trembling. The door creaked open. A woman stepped inside. Her skin was gray, stretched too thin. Her hair hung in wet strands, and her eyes were wide, empty sockets that glistened like glass. She wore a torn hospital gown that clung to her as if still damp. Her bare feet left dark, wet prints on my floor with every step she took. The air filled with a smell of mold and something older, deeper, decay. She stopped in front of me and tilted her head. Her voice came out like wind through broken glass. "Help me." Before I could react, she lunged forward. I screamed and swung the lamp, hitting her shoulder with a sharp crack. The bulb shattered, plunging the room into shadow. She shrieked, a noise that didn't sound human, a twisting wail that made my bones vibrate. Then, as suddenly as she'd appeared, she was gone. I stumbled into the hallway, barefoot, shaking uncontrollably. The building was silent, too silent. The door to 9B was now wide open. Inside, there was nothing but darkness. I stepped in slowly, my phone flashlight shaking in my hand. The smell hit first. Stale air, mold, rot. The walls were covered in scratch marks, hundreds of them, deep and uneven. The floor was bare concrete, except for a stained mattress in the corner. Something dark had soaked through it long ago. I forced myself closer, heart pounding so loud I thought it might echo. On the floor beside the mattress lay a medical wristband. I bent down and read the name, Anna Miles. That was my name. My hands went numb. I stumbled back. My hands went numb. I stumbled back, gasping, my flashlight trembling wildly. Then I saw movement, something crawling out from behind the mattress. A man. His skin was pale, his eyes wild and unfocused. He smiled when he saw me. "She's not gone," he whispered. "She never leaves." Before I could scream, he lunged. I ran, out the door, down the stairs, through the front entrance, until I burst into the freezing night air. My feet were bleeding. I didn't stop running until I reached the police station 2 blocks away. Words tumbled out of me as I told them everything. The noises, the woman, the smell, the scratches, my name on that wristband. The officers went to investigate that same night. When they came back, one of them said quietly, "Apartment 9B is empty, floor spotless, fresh paint, no mattress, no marks, no man." But then he added something else, something that froze the blood in my veins. "Funny thing," he said, "we checked the building records. There was an Anna Miles living in 9B 5 years ago. She was found dead, suicide. No one's lived there since I don't remember how I got home after that." The next morning, I packed my things and left before sunrise. I didn't care where I was going. I just wanted distance, walls that didn't whisper. But sometimes, in places with thin walls, I still hear her voice calling my name through the dark. And every time I look in the mirror, for just a moment I can't tell which Anna I really am.